Welcome to one more segment of Politics Done Right. Today, I'm honored to have El Señor Jerry Ashton, who is the co-founder and director, education and engagement, RIP Medical Debt. Jerry, how are you doing today?
I'm very fine, Egbert. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I like the way you converted my name to the English version, Egbert, instead of Egberto. I want to hear you roll your R's, man.
Egberto.
Oh, wow, that was so good. That was so good. Anyway, Jerry, you know what? You are working on a project, and for anybody who listens to my show, I mean, I am always in awe. I am so generally very happy for people that are doing things for people because we're in a time now where we don't have that. So I'm happy to see that somebody's taking the mantra and running with it. So before we get started, Jerry, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, let me see. Shall I start with the log cabin part or fast
Yes,
forward?
I want you to. Yes.
Well, I'm practically log cabin because I'm in my 80s now, and I've seen a lot, been done a lot, and most of this, a lot of this professional life in my 80 years was working in the bill collection industry. I happen to be an executive in the fine art of accounts receivable control, credit, and collections, which ordinarily would cause a lot of people to turn off your program about now until they realize that I'm the guy who came in out of the rain and that my basic purpose right now is to eliminate people's debt, not to add to it. So that really came about thanks to my experience with Occupy Wall Street. Back in 2011, when I was a youngster, about 70s, something like that,
So
I wandered.
I got to stop you there because I'm learning something now. I was a part of the Occupy movement. In fact, Politics Done Right covered it here in Houston and in Rhode Island and in San Diego and a lot of other places. What got you, this exec, into Occupy Wall Street? I'm shocked at that one.
Well, it's nice to see that people that you might stereotype can move out of that into something different, right?
Right.
So in my case, that's exactly what happened. I was in Oregon for a family get together, and when I was watching TV and I saw this strange thing happening down in Zuccotti Park. Now I live in Manhattan. I live by Union Square, so I'm just a skip and a jump away from Zuccotti Park. So I said to myself, what am I seeing on TV? And obviously a bunch of people that were agitating. That doesn't bother me. That always interests me. And so I decided to check it out when I got back in town. So when I did return to New York, I'm also a former Navy journalist. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take pictures and I want to take notes. So I went down to Occupy Wall Street to see if it was Memorex or if it was real. And sure enough, it was real. So what resonated with me was the fact that there was a very public demonstration and outcry against the inequities that we are all familiar with. The 1% versus 99%, they got bailed out, we got sold out. Yeah, I could relate to that, and I could see how it's happened because in the collections industry, the debt collector is really the arm of business
Exactly.
in more ways than one. You know, they'll put the arm on you in order for you to pay the bill that you owe. So here I am at Occupy Wall Street, great people, energy was unbelievable, and they were talking truth. They were talking truth. They weren't pussyfooting around. And so I started joining different working groups, student debt, media outreach. And eventually, I saw what was going on there, that my particular talents would be able to be applied. And that is, in my background, it's called the debt buying and debt collection industry. So what does that mean? That means I know how to go to that industry, and for a penny on the dollar, I can buy medical debt And for a penny on the dollar, I can do anything with that medical debt that I
I don't want
want
to
to.
go there yet. I don't want to go there because we're about to get into the meat of what your organization is all about. So,
That's very true.
if I understand this right, then what you did is you're did you are you saying that Occupy Wall Street brought this executive social conscience to light, or did you
Yes.
have it in you before?
I always was. I always was a loose cannon.
Uh huh.
I always was. I never got along to get along necessarily, and I was always more than happy to point out where people were going in the wrong direction.
Right.
So, and with my age, I date back to quite a few eras in which my feet hit the street, but never seriously like this. So, the idea, well, my idea was I don't I don't like to march just to march, and I don't like to scream just to scream.
I love
I
that.
like to put I like to put what I know to
Right.
work.
I like
So
that. I like where you're going with that. I understand that. In other words, you don't want to just do things for the sake of doing things or going out in the street and screaming. A lot of what I do with the people that I am with is like we have to empower ourselves to go out and do something. But I want to
yeah,
touch on another thing because this weekend a friend of mine came over. Both of us made sure that we are quarantined over the last few weeks, so we could have come over and had a meal together. And she made a comment that resonated with me, right? And that comment was she was upset with some people who got to the program of doing good after they were good, well, and secured. I don't know how to. I can see both sides of that argument. Okay, one is that you can say some of us need to secure ourselves so that we can actually be a good influence and provide the necessary resources for the movement to go on. To some, it is like, well, to be in the movement, you have to be willing to sacrifice. I see both
well, I'd be
sides of the
happy.
argument.
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that.
Please
I
do.
think where you are is what you do. If you happen to be ensconced in a high-paying job and maybe in a position in an organization where you can use that for good, then use it.
Hmm.
But if your only resource is the unemployment check you get, I'm not expecting you to dump a bunch of money into creating yourself to do something. Find people who are doing what you want to see done. In some cases, it will be marching. In other cases, it'll be protest groups. In my case, I looked at what the problem was and said, okay, with my skill and background, it's a waste for me to carry signs. I'll be the sign. And that sign was eliminate and end medical debt.
I want
That's
to
what
ask
my
another
decision
question in
was.
that light because that is true. What you're saying is absolutely true. You could actually use your skills to actually solve a problem. Now, there are times in this particular economic system where some of those who are a part of the movement are doing so in a detriment to a system for which pays them, for which which the new paradigm shift that I'm thinking about will necessarily affect them. Okay, a lot of people in the movement. I mean, I can say that me joining this movement, what I did necessarily personally affected me. I'm no longer a software developer. I'm just doing this stuff full time. Um,
Just is hardly the word. You are taking, you went from one career into another one. You were still equipped. You're still drawing a lot of wisdom and experience that you had,
exactly.
and that's what you're putting to work when you're telling people what they need to hear as far as you understand it. Just like with me, as well as I understand the problem.
Very good point. Now, my question though is a bit deeper, and I want you are the ideal person to answer it. There are certain things that you are going to stand for that will necessarily affect your current, that not necessarily all of it, but partially your current financial, your personal economy.
hmm I have no problem with saying that those who have more, who temporarily have more, should give to those who temporarily have less. So whether that's through taxation, whether that's through some form of sharing, distribution, the the question that really needs to be asked is, how much are you willing to give up to get this perfect world or a more perfect world? And in my case, since I'm already semi-retired, which is another word for unemployed, when I started my charity, RIP Medical Debt, I'll give you some of the history, but I didn't have a penny to, to put
But
into it, right?
I want to butt in again because your answer was I think the answer that you gave there I think is what a lot of people who are measured in what they do and the way you answered it I think it gives them the reason to come about and say you know what I should be doing this I can do this and I can do my part. We have to many of us make good prototypes for those in the system that refuse to help or refuse to assist and have to be the catalyst to get them off their butts, if you will. And in this 15 minutes that we've spoken thus far, I think you've done a great job in making that clear. So thank you. I want to get, however, to your project because your project is important. Tell us a little bit about RIP, R-I-P.
RIP Medical Debt. Again, it was because of the enthusiasm, the motivation, the desire to make a difference, and to use my particular skill set to do that, that I launched a charity with a partner of mine called Craig Antico, who is also in the debt collections industry. We decided that we would put our talents to work and create a charity, a 501c3. That was in January of 2014. And we were great bill collectors, but we were terrible at raising money. And in the first couple of years, it was horrible. I think we might have raised $20,000 or $30,000 at most. So if it weren't for maybe being in the right place at the right time or good luck, but we were discovered by a comedian by the name of John Oliver, if you're familiar with him.
Of course.
Of course. Well, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver decided that they were going to pillory the debt buying and debt collections industry. And to do that, they disguised themselves as a collection agency and they went to conferences and they took film of these guys saying terrible collection things and they were going to expose that. But like with John Oliver, there's always a purpose behind that. And that is, in his case, he decided he wanted to out Oprah. If you remember, Oprah gave away $7 million for the cars.
Yes.
Well, by way of his collection agency, he purchased for $60,000, almost $15 million worth of debt, medical debt in Texas.
You're kidding me.
And no, that's what he did. And by the way, this on YouTube, this one segment we're talking about has been seen by over 15 million viewers. Because what he did, he says, I'm going to send the collection industry up the flagpole and at the same time become the queen of daytime TV with this gracious gift. Except that there was one problem. In order to make it a real gift, you have to be a 501c3. Otherwise, there are tax consequences.
Right.
Right.
So that's where you came in.
That's where we came in.
Yes.
So just by luck, we happen to be the only thing of our kind in existence as a 501c3. So we were the default choice, and our charity was used by John Oliver very grandly. He had a big red button. Money came down from the ceiling. He announced that he was using RIP Medical Debt, and our website crashes.
Of course it did.
Of course it did. And it was amazing. It was from that point on, which I believe was in June of 2016, that people learned about us. And the most important thing, as you know, is awareness.
Yes.
If people don't know about you, they can't do anything about
Exactly.
you. Same thing with Occupy Wall Street. They created awareness. The second thing that Occupy Wall Street did for me, which is what we did for others, we discovered, is that it touched me. It touched me. I could see the need, I could see the pain, and I was in an industry where I was familiar with that pain.
Right.
So the next thing I had to do, and the next thing that your listeners and your viewers are going to do, is get educated. So when we were chosen to forgive that debt, it touched enough people in the audience that they crashed our website to find out about us. They got educated, and now, of course, the next most wonderful thing is once you're educated, what are you going to do with that? That's called action. Now, this is where I applaud everybody. Action, that they put their words and their thinking and their thoughts into action. Now, it's always a question is how wise is it and how good was the thinking behind it? But the purity of what I'm talking about is what you evidence in your program, what we evidence in our work. So our job, we discovered, was to be the front man for all the organizations that would like to be noticed for the good things that they did. So we discovered that we were able, with RIPMedicalDebt, to connect with major corporations who wanted to abolish medical debt, medical groups that wanted to abolish medical debt, and most recently, the faith-based community. I haven't even told you how much we've abolished so far. Like I said, we raised $20,000 the first 2 years. Well, our goal was to abolish $1 billion worth of medical debt.
Okay.
Now, depending on the dollar, that's still a lot of money.
Right, because you're leveraging it, right? You're leveraging each dollar.
Leveraging the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And so right now, RIPMedicalDebt has abolished over $1.6 billion worth of medical debt.
And what was the ratio?
Well, the ratio is basically a penny on the dollar.
Oh, so you really did a penny on the dollar. Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
That is great.
Now, I was talking about the faith-based community. For some odd reason, there's a resonance about forgiveness and Christians, and of course, Jews and Muslims. In those religions, there's a desire to help those who need help, and forgiveness is the key to that. So when churches discovered that we were able to abolish debt in their neighborhoods, because we can go right down to zip codes, that we could abolish the debt of their neighbors, not necessarily their parishioners,
right, for
a penny on the dollar. Last year, over 100 churches joined with us to abolish $300 million worth of medical debt.
Wow.
So, yeah, here's the sad part. Did I mention I wrote a book?
No, show me your book, and I wish you had told me. I'll put it inside of the. Let me tell you. Put it in the screen. Let me see. Put it up a little bit more.
Okay.
A little bit more to the right. This side. There you go. Okay. I tell you what. I'm going to put a picture of it in the blog when I write the blog post for it. Okay. And I'll also put a link to it on. I imagine it's at Amazon, right?
Yes, it is. Uh-huh.
So I'll get a link and all of that.
Well, when you and I talk about education, and you're an educator, you may think you're a talk show person or what have you.
I'm an engineer, man. Engineer first, please.
Oh,
please.
Yeah. Well, you're engineering education.
Okay. All right. Let's go for it.
So education being that, myself and one of the other founders, Robert Goff, who was our founding board member, we wrote a book called The Patient, the Doctor, and the Bill Collector.
Mm-hmm.
That's a triumvirate, isn't it?
No, it's a crazy word, but go ahead.
Yep, patient, doctor, bill collector. And then we decided we wanted to make sure that medical debt was ended. So that's why we brought Craig into the picture, and the three of us wrote a book. But the interesting thing about that book is that we have three different points of view. It's not just three talking heads saying the same thing. We disagree with each other. We're internally in RIPMedicalDebt, we're as much as a rainbow of thoughts and politics as you'd find in the general public. The difference is, what we've learned to do is to take any of our differences and put them to the side for the greater good. And that greater good is taking medical debt off the backs of our fellow Americans.
Well, look, I'm going to tell you something. I am enlightened. I'm happy that we're going to put this program out here. I think this program is going to be enlightening to quite a few people. One of the things We spent some time together on a conference on a Zoom earlier this week, or I guess late last week.
Yes.
A whole bunch of progressives, I guess, were together discussing issues. Are you a Do you consider yourself a progressive?
Yes. The three authors of the book, I'm the progressive.
Okay.
There's a conservative,
Hmm.
and there's someone who still has a compass.
But anyhow, so I mean, so that what I found, there's a question that was asked, and that was, how can we really make a difference? How can we really get it out there? And one of the things I wanted to say, but being a newcomer to the call with Dennis Kucinich and the mayor of two other cities out there, I am always quiet the very first time I enter a group till I'm no longer
Yeah,
quiet.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And but what I wanted to tell the group was that the biggest hindrance that we have as progressives as getting these words out is getting the word out through the media. And the reason why is that the general purpose, let me tell you, Jerry, you have a great project that you're working on. But that project is something that they want to have on the side. The corporatocracy doesn't want your project to be very much publicized, because that hurts the bottom line of a whole lot of folks if they're settling on a penny on the dollar. You are for the people that they know are absolutely not going to pay that bill, so I'll take a penny on the dollar, right? Or
Okay.
so that is what a lot of folks are going to do. What we have to do, in
Well,
my humble opinion, is you, Jerry, and RIP has to be known, because that is going to be part of the equalizing factor to get the appropriate type of medical system in our sphere.
you are absolutely right. What you've identified isn't quite correct.
Make your
The
point.
powers that be, let's call them the 1%. Let's call
Yes.
them the industrial military complex,
Sure.
whatever we show them to be. And we know they exist, and we know that they have power and control, and we know what they're doing. Those of us who are woke
Right.
know what they're doing. Now, what does a charity like RIP Medical Debt mean to these people? Do they notice it? Do they ignore it? Are they even bothered by it? Because the truth is, every time we forgive $1 million worth of medical debt, which by the way costs about $15,000,
Right.
we're doing it in a community where the local newspaper comes over and interviews them, or they get on a TV show, and people get a very important message. Medical debt causes tremendous harm.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
more people realize that, as they're going to realize with COVID-19, they're going to realize that
Well, you
the
heard me
latest,
say that on my show today about COVID-19 and what it's going to do.
oh,
Better than what Bernie
well,
could possibly do.
well, in my world of debt collections, which by the way, 50% of all collection activity is medical. In 2018, there were, I would think, maybe in the United States, about 27 million people who did not have life insurance.
Hmm.
This last 3 or 4 weeks, 26 million Americans lost their job.
Right.
Now, if 50% of all insurance is job-based, where else are you going to go?
Exactly.
You see, the sad thing about, and the good news and bad news. The good news is we are sweeping up after the parade. The bad news is we're sweeping up after the parade.
Exactly.
And that parade is getting bigger,
Yes.
not smaller.
Yes.
And at the front of this parade, there's a donkey
Hmm.
and there's an elephant,
Right.
and we're sweeping up after that parade. Now,
Right.
we don't want to do that. We want our charity to be put out of business.
Right.
If
Right.
we were put out of
Exactly.
if we were put out of business, so would 50% of all collection agencies in the United States,
Right.
a certain number of credit card issuers, and there are bankruptcy attorneys. There's an industry built around you and me being in debt. And if we could just have that debt released, we would have to open up a whole new world for these people.
Jerry Ashton, co-founder and director, education and engagement of RIP medical debt. I think you've enlightened our audience. I think you've probably going to get quite a few customers from our audience. And I think what you're doing is such an important task. And I do eventually, based on the type of politics I serve, I hope you get out of business in the next few years. But you are doing a great job. And I want to thank you, and I am sure our audience want to thank you for what you're doing for society at large. We need more like you.
Well, thank you so much. Egberto.
I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post